Hello and welcome to module 4 on relationships. So, James, the big R word. So, I would say the most important thing for you out there is it sounds cheesy, but it is the relationship with yourself. So, definitely don't skip the previous modules because that's all about the relationship with yourself. And I don't know if you would agree, James, that a relationship will just with somebody else, whether it's an intimate relationship, will just mirror back things that you haven't worked for on yourself. It will be like an amplifier. So if you've not addressed something in yourself, you get into a relationship, something's going to amplify
Yeah,
somewhere
that's
along the
really
line.
interesting. That is really interesting. I hadn't necessarily thought about that it's going to show you all of your failings, but all of the areas that potentially you should be looking at.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting what you want or what you need from the relationship, that's possibly the reason why.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just romantic relationships, it's, friendship groups, the way in which you react to other people, and really, really important in terms of this toolbox of things that we have for a happy, fulfilling life. One of them is connection and how you are with other people. Again, anecdotally, for me, as soon as I was able to let go of that defense mechanism of not wanting to show the true me, not wanting to be vulnerable or open and honest, that as soon as I let that go, relationships were so much easier, more powerful, more intense, and fulfilling because I was showing the real me. And that's how people
Yeah.
can connect with you, as you allow yourself to be fallible and imperfect, and you're not trying to show this facade that I've got everything sorted and everything, my life is great and life is wonderful and all that sort of bullshit. But you're going, you know what? Yeah, I've made mistakes and I'm not very good at that, but I am good at this. And just the openness and honesty and not necessarily caring what other people think of you, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but getting to that point in which you're just okay in your own skin enables other people to connect with you because they can then relate to the crags and the cracks and the flaws. And it's really hard if you are presenting this front of perfection for people to be able to connect with that because there's nothing to hold on to, nothing to relate to.
It's very difficult, isn't it? If you've got these fear-based coping mechanisms that we all have and they haven't been addressed, then you might attract certain types of people or certain types of relationships into your life, whether that's the neurotic friend or the boyfriend that cheats on you or the same partner that you've seemed to have had like 3 times, the same type of scenario, or it gets serious and then you back away. So you've been modeling relationships since childhood. And maybe, there's a lot of us out there, James and I, who observed very dysfunctional relationships growing up between parents. It's not what a healthy, conducive environment would be for raising children. Who knows what yours might have been? You might have very great loving parents and it was a great modeling for you, or you might not have had and you might have got that from somewhere else. Maybe you had a good teacher at school, or you've just tried to figure it out along the way. But learning about yourself, James, we was talking about dating apps before we went on, how they're starting to change to try and get people to focus on improving their own well-being, their own self-esteem, and
Mm,
then building that up before they get into a relationship. But it's not about, like you said, about coming across as being the end product or being perfection, because you want to find a person that you're connected to who is open to growth, because you're not going to
yeah,
be the same person, are you, James, every 10 years?
no,
You're an evolving entity. So
totally.
you want somebody on that journey with you who's going to
And
evolve
it is
and grow.
it's tricky if you need somebody else to complete you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
if all the time you're looking for validation or you're looking for somebody else to give you what you need to make you feel better about yourself, or it's an impossible task for that other individual. It's exhausting and it's very hard to maintain because, again, on any given day, the way you feel, and if that's the pressure that's being put on you to provide that for your partner, it's a huge responsibility and it's unfair. So, if we can get ourselves into a situation where we can give ourselves what we need, so we're self sufficient in that respect, then we can then be giving to others
Yeah.
because there's not that level of expectation, and you'll rarely be disappointed because there's that awareness piece that we are fallible, we are human, we none of us are perfect. So to expect that from our partner all the time, to be that person that you need, yes, you know, we've got to be supportive. We have to be there to in times of need. Absolutely, that's not what I'm saying. But there's this element that if we aren't sorted in ourselves in that respect, then it's unreasonable to expect somebody else to make up for that shortfall.
Yeah. It takes a level of, I would say, relationships from both sides, a level of EQ, so that emotional intelligence, be able to have that awareness like we have in module 1, to understand certain patterns. Maybe you grew up in a chaotic environment, and chaos is an addiction for you, so you get into chaotic relationships because that's what you are familiar with,
Yep.
which may not be healthy.
But
And
it's
just
what you know.
recognizing it, yeah,
It's what you know. It's what you're used to. It's a comfort zone. It doesn't
it's a
serve
comfort
you,
zone. Yeah.
but we again move towards the familiar. And there's another thing associated with childhood trauma is people pleasing. And that need for validation, that need for affection and to fit in when we didn't fit in as children, or we didn't get the attention that we needed, we didn't get the nurturing, so we're now looking for that as an adult, and as a result we don't set healthy boundaries. So
Yeah.
that's a work to process of actually advocating for ourselves, setting those healthy boundaries. And it's not about changing your personality necessarily, but it's just having, again, the awareness around the relationships you have with other people. If it's very one-sided, as in you're sacrificing everything for that other person, then that's something to take account of and to really look into the reasons why. And if you're very much one of these people that puts everyone else first over and above your needs, then more than likely you are a people pleaser, and that's the childhood trauma that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and that could be your coping mechanism, couldn't it? To put everyone first because it's harder to look in the mirror and focus on your own thing. It's easier to deal with other people's problems. So you might
Yeah,
see yourself as a bit of a hero, but in reality, you might be running away from truth that you're not facing yourself. So it is a really deep process of understanding yourself, and your life is a reflection of that. You'll see it in your partner, or you'll see things that happen in that relationship, whether your sex life potentially dries up. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and your sex life evolves depending on how long you've been together and what your personalities are like, but you're looking for certain things in that relationship of how you connect, how you respond to arguments or disagreements, what your values are. Really, a lot of relationships come down to values. Do you want the same things? Do you think about things in roughly the same way? Do you value the same things? Because if you're not on the same page, then you could just be like completely pulling and pushing in completely different directions, can't you, James, on those things?
And communication is absolutely key, because you could be triggered by something, or it's said in a way, or with a look, or with an attitude, and you don't know why in that moment in time, but it's triggered you, and then you push back, and the defense mechanisms come up, and you just go round in these sort of cycles. And again, we've talked before in terms of neuroplasticity and the belief system, is that if you believe that that is your relationship, that you just go through these cycles of behavior. We have these conversations, I'll say something, you then respond in a particular way, and then we just go around in this loop.
Yeah.
That if that is happening continuously, pretty much it's going to go in one direction. You know, over time, it just calcifies, you get this attrition and erodes the relationship to the point where you go, we're arguing all the time.
Yeah.
So it's not just with a romantic partner, it's potentially with your children, with work colleagues, parents. Certainly, you know, that's highly nuanced, the way in which you talk to and are spoken to by your parents. All of those things, you know, we are adults now, but a lot of those behaviors have been cemented from childhood. And you and I are both parents, so we know how we feel about our children, but also we are children of parents. So you see it from both sides. So we know the relationships that we have with our kids. And mine, for example, I try very hard not to keep thinking of them as like when they were 5 years old, because we have an idea of them when they were that age. And even though they are adults in their own right now, you still see them as your kids and as children, but now they're adults. But if we're still talking to them or treating them, protecting them like we do when they were little, then you're just taking away their agency. And again, their lived experience is not my lived experience. My growing up was not their growing up. So again, it's taking things into context as well to make sure that you're keeping a open perspective on where they're at, where you're at the same age, and then not projecting your own sensibilities onto that situation.
Yeah.
So it's being more kind of open and rounded in that respect. But we have structures, we'll put it in the PDF as well for relationships, and certainly relationship with your partner, of communicating. And if we do it in a structured way, to begin with, it seems really awkward and a bit contrived. But over time, it just feels much more natural. So there are certain criteria that we can use in which you can communicate with your partner in a way that doesn't come across as judgmental or guilt-based or accusatory. It's just perhaps curious. So I'm curious about this, and maybe I'm going to give my observations and recommendations for certain things, as opposed to, you know, you do this, I want you to do this, or I think you should act in this way. It's much more open, more flowy, and like I said, coming from curiosity.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it, James? Because
just nicely
you gotta
structured.
see the relationship as an ongoing process of your own self-development, because you're going to change. You're changing all the time. The context of your situation is going to change. The
Mm,
honeymoon phase is not the same as the post children phase. The
yeah,
first 2 years is not going to be same as year 20. Then
totally.
somebody gets sick, somebody loses a job.
Yeah.
The context of your life is always evolving. So
Well, we'd like to think, when we come into a relationship, that it should be fairly sort of balanced. If one person feels like they're sort of at this level and the other person, that's a pretty tricky basis to start with. We should be sort of fairly equal to begin with, but over time, things happen. That equality changes. If one person has lied or have been unfaithful, or something happens, maybe the business has struggled or something. So those levels change throughout the relationship. And it's how you deal with that, because there's never equality through the entire trajectory of that relationship. Things change, situations change, as you said.
yeah,
So it's how you deal with those moments when they arise, to acknowledge that and
and
have
that's
the
that's a real
language.
skill, isn't it, James? That
Mm,
language, that communication, sort of understanding your own ego, just understanding of yourself, your
yeah,
partner having that feeling of they want to grow as well, and you're both a team and you're working on the same
yeah,
growing in the same direction, and understanding that you know everything's not always smooth. It's not easy. Life's not easy.
it
Relationships in the
really
modern
isn't.
age is very tricky, because now you don't just know the person in your village. You've got the open potential to meet anybody around the world at any time on your phone. And that's why divorce rates are at 50%. That's why, women and guys are struggling to find partners.
Mm,
Children are growing up without fathers in many
yeah,
cases. There's a
and
lot of
look,
dysfunction in this area, James,
yeah,
isn't there?
and we're not saying that you've got to stay together by any means. But what I do say is that having a level of understanding as to why that relationship
Yeah.
broke down, I think that's key to going to the next relationship. So this one might not be right for you, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
I think it's having the understanding as to why it didn't work, and the learnings from it, and what you can then take into the next relationship. Because if you're going from one relationship to the next relationship to the next, and they're all ending in a similar kind of way, well, there's a common denominator here. And how do you then reconcile that going forward to say, well, actually, I do want to be happy. I'd like to be in a loving relationship. So what needs to happen? And that's the internal work that would need to be done. If you're constantly looking or blaming the other person for the breakdown, you've got to ask yourself some pretty
Some
probing questions
bigger questions.
as
Yeah.
to whether it was the other person, or whether actually it's you, that you're not maybe choosing the right person.
Yeah, I
That's
like
an
that,
element
James.
to it.
If you frame something as everything is co-created, even if somebody has an affair, you've got to say, okay, what role did you play in this equation? Why did that
Yeah.
person have an affair? Were they unhappy? Is it part of their personality? Can you accept that in their personality? You might accept that that's what they're like. You might not accept that that's something that you want to be a part of. And that's your choice to then move away from that relationship. Or you might be somebody who's scared to love because you're scared to be hurt. So you never
Yeah.
open up, you never take down the barriers. People
Yeah.
can never get in and know who you are. So you never
Yeah.
have any opportunity. You shut it down before it gets going.
But again, it comes down to how you feel about yourself, the
Yeah.
value that you have in yourself. If you have very little value in yourself, you accept what's coming to you. And it's almost like the self sabotage of saying, well, I knew it was going to finish. It was only a matter of time. And you're kind of going into these relationships almost thinking that it's like the impermanence of it,
Yeah.
that because historically this is how it's gone, and this is what I deserve, because I know that, you know, we go along for a little bit and then I have an affair. And it's like, well, why is that happening?
It's like
Why
a
are you acting?
self-fulfilling prophecy of what you
And
think about yourself ends up actually happening because that's who you
yeah,
are.
and
That is
that's,
your
you know,
consciousness at that
and I'm
specific
and
moment
I'm
in
not a
time.
nice person. I'm a bad person, and actually, I just got what I deserve. So, you know, say la vie.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of this stuff is highly nuanced. It's highly personal, but it takes a level of introspection and that self-awareness to go, you know, what is happening right now? Why is this happening? Why is this continuously happening?
Yeah.
And what can be done about it? And the belief that actually it can look different,
And your
but it's going to be
personality
hard.
test can be a very powerful tool, like we've
A good
done
indicator
in
to that.
module two, can be very powerful for relationships. And really, people might say, oh, what's the point? Do I need a relationship? Is the relationship important? Well, people on their deathbed, there's a book about deathbed regrets, and they say, relationships are normally right there at the top in terms of the level of importance at the end of people's lives, James, when at the end of the day it doesn't matter if you've got the the degree, the certificates on the wall, you made a few £1,000,000, you're not going to be celebrating the Ferrari that you bought on your deathbed. It will be about the depth and the connection with the loved ones around you, the people that love
Mm,
you, the things that you've done. It's going to be about the relationship. So they are important. You are a leader in that, whether you think you are or not. There's people, whether it's your children, your colleagues, everything is a relationship. Your relationship with yourself, relationship with food, relationship with your friends, the relationships you may not necessarily choose in terms of your family members, but you can choose how you react to them or what
yeah,
type of relationship you have with them. And then
yeah,
the closest ones to you are going to be your obviously your normally your partner and your children. So you are leading and having enough
yeah.
impact on everybody around you by doing that. So in terms of, we like something called the Institute, which is one of the biggest institutes on relationships there is out there. Very great stuff, all scientifically validated theories on relationships there, and something they find in people who get divorced, James, or what they can see it straight away in the first 5 minutes. There's a sequence of behaviors because the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So if you see yourself doing this, it might be divorce from a new relationship. Who knows? It could be a relationship with your children as well that you do this. But if you can see these four horsemen happening or these four behaviors, then that's when you're going to be spiraling in a negative direction. And if you know about them, you can be conscious and you can start to change them. So the four horsemen are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So criticism will be, criticizing someone's character when they do something. Maybe your husband leaves their clothes on the floor and you might say, you're such a messy person, you're always doing this. This is a criticism of character rather than the situation itself. You're going to say, oh, please, do you mind just picking that up? It would help us out in this
Mm,
situation. It bugs me because I have to do it and I am super busy, but I understand you're busy as well. That frames it totally. It's different, but that's just an example. So criticism can get out of hand in situations, and then if it turns into contempt, so you're even more mocking them as a person,
mm,
saying, oh, it's him again or it's her again, this is what she's like, it's what she does. It's basically setting the negativity in stone and you're
yeah,
mocking that situation. And then what happens with the other person is they can become defensive. So then they react back. They have that defensive attitude and say, well, you didn't do this last Tuesday. I asked you to do this and you didn't do it. Yeah, I left this on the floor, but you didn't. Then it's a to and a fro. And
Yeah.
then when it gets to the fourth stage of what they call
Stonewalling,
which is when one or both of you, you might have this with different personality types more conducive to it, but they emotionally shut down. So you get into an argument and then the person goes quiet and they don't have eye contact with you, they avoid you. You try to, some people say they can't go to bed on an argument and they're trying to get it out and the other person's stonewalling. It can be a visceral response that they
don't have to happen in that order either. I mean, the stonewalling can be there right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And especially in heightened emotions, one or even both. I mean, usually it's one individual because kind of opposites seem to sort of attract. But, one of the individuals could shut down emotionally in conflict, again, because of childhood trauma. And I speak to that because that was me.
Yeah.
So that would be my coping mechanism, is I'd shut down. Because I learned from a very early age that my emotions didn't affect the outcome. It didn't matter if I cried, if I shouted, if I whatever, the outcome would be absolutely the same. So I just learned to bury my emotions. So if ever there was a situation where there was conflict or, again, heightened emotions, I would just go into myself. I'd go somewhere else in my head. I would just shut down. So that is a version of stonewalling.
It is, yeah.
So there are different aspects of it, but that is pretty much what it looks like, is when you shut down emotionally.
It's exactly what happens, James. And then you lose that communication, then that other person's switching off emotionally. And if it goes to another deeper stage, they call that flooding, where you're emotionally flooded to the point where you're like stone cold now.
Yeah.
You've shut down. You're not letting anybody in. And then the relationship can get toxic. They say this is what leads to pretty much imminent breakdown of a relationship. And if you lose those bids of connection, what they call it, the ability to be able to overcome conflict quite quickly, normally sometimes it's with some type of humor. If you can have something happen and then you reconnect quite quickly, could be with a joke, could be something, it diffuses the situation and then you're back into a healthy loop. If those things don't happen and the criticism, contempt, defensive snowballing becomes chronic, then you have some major issues. And it's had it called before, it's like an energy prison, that when you're in the relationship, it can be all encompassing and it's very, very difficult. Your life becomes difficult. It becomes difficult to stay, on track with your business, on track with your healthy eating, and it's one of those things, James, I found it with clients that sometimes it can be an obvious problem to somebody from the outside, but because it's so painful to face, it's so hard for that person to own it and say, we've got a relationship problem. And I had that with my first wife, and saying there was a problem. I wasn't listening at that point, and then it became chronic. So I think there's a thing there about really, if you can see those signs, or if that resonates with you, then start to recognize that and put something in place where you can improve it, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. So on to the homework. So there are love languages. How many love languages are there, John?
I think there's five, isn't there?
5 love languages.
5 love languages on there. So we'll put those in the PDFs on the
So that's going to be a
on the
quiz.
love.
So to find out which one is your love language, and then you can get your partner to do it as well.
Yeah, it's
So,
like a helpful tool. A lot of these are
mm,
just helpful general tools, but what like you'll find with most of the modules, guys, that some of the hardest things in the world are the most simplest, aren't they, James? They're like the simple things in life, like
when
just
you
drink
know it,
enough
you just go,
water,
how did I
do
not
some
think
exercise,
of that?
communicate, don't be defensive all the time, be open, have a belief, move towards the do it on a regular basis. How many of those simple things don't we do that end up showing up in a relationship?
Yeah. And
And
incrementally over time, you'll see the changes. You just get this little
yeah,
glimmer, this sliver of light that comes through, and you go, that feels different.
yeah.
Wow.
There's a story about the self-worth on this side. It just reminded me of people like who have, if you've been on the other end of people having affairs or you've done it yourself, you got the shame, the guilt, you know, you don't trust anymore. But just
Mm,
imagine if, you know, if you've only got £10 in your pocket and somebody steals £10 from you, you're gonna feel like not very good, are you? You're gonna feel this is all I've got. This is I need this. This feels terrible. If you've got £1 million in your pocket and someone steals £10, how are you gonna feel? So if you say that money is like self-worth and somebody takes that from you, you know, that's the strong foundations of who you are. The relationship is a connection that's adding something to you. You don't necessarily need it. Yes, if relationships break down, it's super painful,
mm,
but you've got to be open to pain if you're going to love. And that is the truth, isn't it, James? For most thing, if you want to love something like a child, a relationship, or anything, you want to go after your dreams or your passions, sometimes you've got to put yourself on the line of extreme pain, because at the end of the day, eventually we will lose, you
yeah,
know, you will lose yourself or you will lose that person. And that is the unfortunate sequence of life, isn't it, James, on that side?
it
So
is.
we will have more articles on the relationship side because, like as James says, it's highly nuanced. We could go into sexual relationships, dating, difference between men and women, um, marriages. There's a lot of nuance to relationships, isn't it, James? But I would say stick to the other modules, listen to what we've said in this one, and that will give you, you know, 90% of the frameworks. And the rest of the stuff, this is going to be an ongoing learning experience where we'll share articles on different parts of relationships and books that we've read that we recommend. But start with the
Absolutely.
basics and then we'll grow as the years go by on this one.
Love it.
Okay, James, is there any homework to do on this one?
Yeah, that was the love languages and also a meditation. Again, it's going to be self-love.
Self-love on that one. Okay, guys. So if you've got questions, send them to us and we'll be happy to answer them. And then we'll see you on the next module. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.